running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100? Thank you for joining me today here on Trail to 100, the podcast made to help you finish your first 100-mile race. My name is Jacob Bateman, and today I was joined by Matt Simeone. Now, Matt ran 100 miles last year. He lives out in Virginia. Ran it for the first time last year on a looped course, very flat. Did it in under 24 hours. Wow, what a time. But Matt decided he wanted something a little more. And so Matt was familiar with the mountains of Utah as his parents lived out here in Utah. I live in Wyoming, just right on the border to Utah, so I know exactly where he's talking about. And Matt decided he wanted to come run the Wasatch 100 out here. Now he lives at sea level, very flat area around where he lives, so he had to deal with the challenge of trying to be fit enough training at sea level so that he could climb to those 10,000 foot peaks in the mountains. So we were able to dive into what that takes, and Matt gave us a great perspective as he kind of jumped back and forth between what he did in training and how it helped him in the race as he progressed through the race and his training plan and the race. Really did a great job of breaking down what helped, what didn't, and ultimately what led to him being able to go from sea level to finishing a mountain 100 at 10,000 feet in Utah. Matt hit on things about how mental the race can be, what the role the mind plays, how to simplify your training to make it doable, how to read your body, and how to fit it all in with a family and kids. So great conversation with Matt. Let's get to it. Well, Matt, thank you for joining me today here on the podcast. I am super excited to hear about your 100-mile story.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really stoked to be here.
Yeah. So, Matt, when you first reached out, you saw me post about my experience of pacing at the Wasatch 100, and you were like, "Hey, I was just there. Sad that I missed you." So you live in Virginia, and you decided to come out to Utah to run 100 miles. What put that in your head?
Yeah, so my parents live in Park City, or just outside of Park City off Interstate 80, and I've been going out there skiing and snowboarding and stuff since like 2008. My parents moved there in 2014, and so it's just kind of been my home away from home. And when I got into this world of ultra running, I was like, everyone kind of starts small, I guess, 50Ks and stuff. And then I somewhere read about this 100-mile thing, and then found out there was one that was essentially in their backyard. And then I started looking at it and saw that Brighton Lodge is one of the key aid stations, and that Brighton is like me and my dad's like special place. So it was just like there's so many cool like sentimental things that lined up for this race. Also, I have a place to stay there. Cars and the logistics are easy. So it just kind of became like, oh, I'm definitely doing this.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. I mean, I always have so much respect, when I hear from people from lower elevations, like the state of Virginia. I don't know what elevation you live at, but I'm sure it's probably not 5,000 feet.
No, I think I'm at like 6.
Okay.
Like literally.
Like 6 feet coming
6
up
feet,
to
yeah.
do a race where you get up to like 10,000 feet.
Yep.
So what, I guess, take me back a little bit. What got you into the ultra running world in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess my running journey started Back in 2009, I think, and it was just kind of like most people trying to lose weight. Um, I was at that point I would have been 22, um, and I had, really kind of enjoyed the college experience, probably a little too much. And I mean, I was always a bigger kid for sure growing up. Like, I wasn't the most athletic, but I mean, I had gotten up to like I think the heaviest I ever saw on a scale was like 287, and I'm only 5'9", so like
Oh yeah.
pretty big dude.
Yeah.
And it just one day my parents were like, just kind of being concerned, and we're like, hey, we trying to encourage you to start taking care of yourself. And my dad was like, why don't you come to the gym with me? And so I did. I just happened to hop on the treadmill with him, and kind of cold turkey, I somehow was able to run 3 miles in about 30 minutes. Just hadn't done it for since high school sports. Um, so that kind of gave me like a weird little boost of confidence. Like, that wasn't as hard as it should have been. And then I just kind of kept working out from there, and ended up losing a bunch of weight, and running was definitely the mainstay of like my workout. Um, but then I just kind of dabbled in the whole gym thing for a while. Um, played around with like CrossFit and just some other types of exercise programs. And it wasn't until 2019 that I got kind of serious into running. And the only reason it happened was I was scrolling Facebook one day, and I saw like the Runner's World magazine Facebook page was like, it was in January, and it was like, join us this year for, commit to run like 500, 1,000, or 2,000 miles in a calendar year. And I was like, oh, 2,000 miles, like that's insane. And I was like, I'm gonna try to do it. So I figured out like how many miles per day it was gonna be, and just kind of committed to just see if I could do it. Um, yeah, that was 2019. I think I ended up doing
Oh,
3,600 and something miles that
dang.
year. Yeah,
You
I
blew
was.
that out.
Yeah, that's definitely like
I,
something.
d- I don't even think I ran 2,000 miles in a year ever.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was a lot. Like, but that's definitely a part of my personality. Is like,
Uh-huh.
if I get focused on something, it's like I'm gonna take it to the
Yeah.
nth degree. So yeah, so it was just a challenge. And then I remember that summer, I think it was June or July. I saw again just some random posting for a 50K in Virginia Beach, where I live, and I was like, well, I might as well put all these ridiculous miles to something. So I just signed up for it. I had never even heard of a 50K. I didn't know, like I had to Google what miles that was. And so I signed up for it, and that's kind of what kicked off the ultra running
Yeah.
journey for me.
Did you know at that time that you wanted to go 100 miles?
No, I didn't even know that existed. Like, I don't even think it might have been like another year until I read somewhere like, oh, there's longer than this. I just figured ultra marathon, that was kind of like the end. It's just there wasn't anything beyond like a 50K or something.
Yeah.
Um, because I've never actually run a half marathon or a marathon. Never
Oh,
signed up
wow.
for one. Obviously, I've done the distance, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Races are ridiculously expensive. They're
True
usually really
that.
busy. Yeah, I don't want to spend. I just don't really like the idea of spending like 15 minutes trying to just get to the starting line in this big giant corral, and then weaving your way through a bunch of people. So I just kind of run for myself, for health, I mean, even mental health reasons. I know you and your wife actually talked about that in the podcast you released today, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, and then like most people, 50K turns into something a little bigger, a little bigger, a little bigger. Then eventually you hear about the 100, and that's kind of the
Yeah.
pinnacle. I mean, there's certainly ridiculously long races out there, but
Yeah.
100 is kind of like the thing, I guess, for
So
us.
So what made you decide I can do 100 miles? Like I'm gonna go for it.
Well, I didn't really know if I could. I knew what my 50K times were. So, I knew what I could do 31.1 whatever miles. And I just kind of started looking at races, and I started to notice that, like, there's kind of there seems to be like a bunch of different phases. Like, you've got the 50K, and then you might have like the 12-hour race, the 24-hour race. There's a bunch of different kinds. Um, so the next step from there for me was, well, let me do one of these like 24-hour races. Let me run through a night. I've never done that before, and let me just see how that kind of turns out. So that was like my progression, I guess, was 50K, 24
Yeah.
hours, and then once I figured out kind of all the little things, it's like, well, now let me go for like a point to point 100.
Okay.
So
When you did the 24-hour race, you notched the 100-mile mark. Impressive. 100 miles, I don't care how flat it is or if it's on a road or track or whatever. 100 miles in 24 hours, that's impressive. Did you go into that knowing, like, the back of your mind, like, I'm going to shoot for 100 miles, or was it just totally, we're just seeing how this goes?
yes, the latter.
Yeah.
So I did it last year, 2023. And it's in April. It's here well, it's just like the city over, but it's a 3.75 mile loop, I think. It's like perfectly flat. I mean, for around here, it's trail. It's,
Yeah.
most of it's kind of like a gravel access road. Then you got like a little half of the course is trail. It's just dirt. But yeah, no, I went out the first time and I just was like, let me just see how long I can do this. And I just kind of took it as like an experiment. That year I went out, I certainly didn't plan on doing 100 miles. It was just like, let me use this as just kind of like an experiment, like
Yeah.
figure out some stuff. And it went really well. Like, the strategy on that race was, and this was really stupid in hindsight, but I just was like, I'm gonna run until I can't, and then just kind of make it up as I go from there.
Yeah.
So I think I hit like 28, 29 miles, um, and then I kind of stopped, and then the next phase of running was a little 10 miles, and then that race it started. We had like a severe thunderstorm. We started the race at 7 a.m. We had like a severe thunderstorm at like 3, to the point where they like actually halted the race for about an hour. I think I was in like the 40s into the race, and it really sucked because it just like stopped everything.
Yeah.
You got really tight, you got wet,
Yeah.
um, and then they let us back out. But then it just drizzled from like 4 p.m. until midnight, and half the trail was like this deep in mud. I mean, it was awful. I actually kept the shoes, and they're still caked in the mud just because it kind of tells the story. Um, but yeah, so I made it until about 2 a.m. I hit 75 miles, and just I was so miserable. My feet were beyond raisin status. There's no point in changing your clothes or your shoes because they're just going to get just as wet as the old ones. Um, and I think I walked like the last 25 miles just because I was mad, and I was like,
Sounds
it
like
was,
me.
yeah, it was just, I mean, it was a good experience, but it also really, really sucked because of the weather.
Yeah.
Um, but then fast forward to this April 2024, I did the same race again. Um, and this is one of those races where you run individually, but also as a team. So I think there's 12. You can get it like up to 12 people, and so your team's cumulative miles counts for like a
Okay.
prize, and then your individual also. So
Okay.
um, the local running store that I help like ambassador for and stuff, they asked me to join their team, and the team leader, her name's Andrea. She's like my ultra running like little mentor, I guess. she put our team together, and then I was sitting there. It was about 6:50 in the morning, and I remember she looked at me. She's like, "Hey, what's your strategy for this thing?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm just gonna do what I did last time, and maybe I'd go a little further." Because I told her I was like, "I do want to try for the 100." And so, she was like, "Okay, well, here's what we do. We run four and twos." And in my head, I'm thinking this is a long, long race. So I was like, "Oh, 4 miles, 2 miles, like four running, two walking." And she was like, "No, dude." She was like, 4 minutes running, 2 minutes walking.
Oh,
And so we did that until like mile 78, maybe 80. And I
wow.
was like completely blown away. Like it just worked. It was like
That
I don't know if they figured it out somehow, but it's like the perfect interval of like, you basically run like almost half a mile and then walk, about a couple tenths of a mile, whatever that equals. And it's just like the perfect, like, you just kind of start getting a little winded after 4 minutes, and then you walk two, calm down. And we just did that for, gosh, I don't know, 18, 19 hours. And it was amazing. And then I had so much time built in towards the end because of that strategy that I just walked the last 20.
wow.
Because
And
I
you
mean,
got the 100.
yeah, I finished in 23 hours and 10 minutes. And they were trying to get me to go back out and do like another mile. I was like, absolutely not. Like, 100 is 100. I don't, 101 means nothing to me. Like, I'm done.
I'm
Um,
the same way.
yeah, like at that point, I do not care. But yeah, that just really kind of like opened my eyes to like alternative strategies and stuff, and something I had never even thought of. And I was like, holy cow, that worked.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. When you say that, that sounds really mentally taxing to like keep track of that, and
So,
like you can't get in a groove because I just start getting in the groove and then nope, gotta walk, and
yeah,
okay, let's
it
go, nope, gotta walk.
I will say it took me probably about an hour to like adjust. But they just had this little thing, and it's this product on Amazon, um, and it's this interval counter, but it's like super basic, and it just beeps at you. It's like one beep for the 4 minute interval and two beeps for the walking interval. So it's as simple as it can be. It's audible. You don't have to like look at something, like look at your watch, like, okay, in 10 seconds we're running again. It's just so you can run in a group, you can run alone, and as long as you just hear that like beep beep, you know to go. And yeah, it took some time to settle in for sure.
Yeah,
Um, but then you do that for 24 hours, and it was like automatic by middle of the day.
yeah.
So
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I think when you're running flat, you got to find a rhythm like that because you could really burn out easily.
yeah, to me it was amazing how fresh I felt at like mile 70 still.
Yeah,
I mean, I
yeah,
just felt like, I mean, you feel horrible, but like in context, it's like I'm
yeah,
better than I should be at this point.
yeah.
So,
So then, looking forward that from there, you decide to sign up for the Wasatch 100. It's a lottery, so you find out that you've been pulled.
hmm
How do you feel like training wise now? Because this is a totally different 100-mile race, point to point in the mountains, very technical, high elevation. Um, how are you feeling, and what was your game plan to get ready for a mountain 100?
Yeah, so that's like such a loaded question. So I knew it was going to be like almost so different that you can't even compare.
Yeah.
Having your aid station at the same point for every 3.5 miles was awesome. It never moved, so you could, people could bring you stuff. You could share stuff with everyone, all the runners in your group. So like, I almost tried to just be like, okay, I know what the distance feels like, but just forget about that race because it's not going to be anything like that. Um, as far as like training went, living at sea level and here it's from April to, well, today it was 80 degrees. So, but like from April to beginning of October, it's pretty good chance it's going to be hot as you know what and humid as all get out. Um, so like I knew the one thing that I had going for me that everyone had said about Wasatch was like, do your heat training, do your
Yeah.
heat training. I was like, I think I should be good. Like the heat shouldn't bother me, but it was like, what is the elevation going to do, and what is the climbing going to do?
Yeah.
And I had no idea how to train for that. We have two bridges in my area that have 100-foot like vertical. It
Yeah.
just have little sidewalks, and so I mean you can go do those, back and forth, which is just mind-numbingly awful. Um, but other than that, like I mean we do have some like state parks that have trails that are, you can practice like on roots and stuff, like trying to mimic rocks or whatever. Um, but in hindsight, now that I've done the race, I don't really think anything could have prepared me for what the course was like. Um, I did go out and do a training run at Brighton in, it was like maybe the second or third week of August. I just went and, I parked down at the lodge base, and I went like up the Millie side of the mountain, and I think you do like Millie Peak, Mount Wolverine, Catherine's Pass, and then
Yeah.
you come around, and it was only like 9 miles, and I remember it took me over 4 hours, and I finished the run and just like sat at my car for a minute and was like, I am in big trouble because like I am absolutely gassed right now, and that was less than a tenth of the course, and I used way more time than I should have. So I
Yeah.
had like a moment there where I was like, oh boy, Um, but yeah, so I mean,
Did
I
it pass?
tried,
Like, how'd you get that out of your head? Because it's 3 weeks away. You can't be
yeah,
dwelling on that.
no, like we were talking about before we hopped on here, you really can't replicate race day, you know. And I know that portion of the course is the highest point that you get to. Um, I would say it's probably in the upper end of the technical terrain that you'll see on the course.
Oh yeah, I'd say that's probably one of the most technical parts coming down
Yes,
from Catherine's Pass.
dude,
Yeah.
that was the
And
worst.
and you're at over 70 miles in at this point too.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Um, but no, I mean, I kind of just took it honestly as like more of a wake up call than anything else. It's like, okay, dude, you need to, make up time where you can make up time because like this is hard. And it's not a joke, and it's not going to be easy. Yes, 36 hours is a long time, but like that sucked. So, but anyway, like kind of going back, like how do you train at sea level for this? Honestly, I kind of just tried to get away from like training for the specific like Wasatch course or like the ups and downs and the elevation. It was just like for all of 2024, I'm just gonna try to be like as running fit as I could and just focus solely on endurance, and because I was like, you can't replicate it. I'm not gonna go find like one of those weird elevation like treadmill mimicking things. Like I don't have that kind of money and time to go do all that crazy stuff. So it's just like just run as much as you can and just be as fit as you
yeah.
possibly can and just kind of hope that when you get there you can overcome a lot of
Yeah.
that stuff. And that's kind of how I look at training in general. Like I don't think I could ever work with a coach because I just get really bored with like, okay, today we're doing 1 mile repeats at, X tempo or whatever. And I'm just like, I just would rather run.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I just ran a lot.
I like what you say there. And as I've had the opportunity to do this podcast, and I've talked with a few people from who lived at sea level and come out to do mountain hundreds. And honestly, most of them echo exactly what you just said. It's about just being as fit as possible on race day, because ultimately, if you have the fitness, you'll be able to manage through that kind of terrain. So like it's nice. Like I know there's a lot of people that most of them live out here, and they'll say like, you got to train on the terrain that you're gonna run. Like you got to replicate it, and I get what they're getting at, but we have lives. You can't be flying out to, or you driving. Like, I know Virginia has mountains, but maybe you're not by them. Like, you can't make a 2-hour drive to a trailhead every weekend, So
Yeah,
like,
no, well, actually, there's something that I have a kind of a different, and it's easy for me to say this because I don't live in Utah or I don't live in the mountains or where these races are, but I totally see and understand and half agree with like train on the terrain that you're going to race on to be familiar with it. But I also think there's another side of that, which is like if you know a section like, I mean, Bear Canyon, like it's awful. There's nothing about it fun. I don't care if you've done it 20 times, like it's gonna suck every time. But someone like me who had never even seen it before, I really didn't know like, okay, well, once we get to this tree, we've got the next gnarly part of the climb and then it mellows out. It's just like I just have to get up there to the top. I don't know what anything that's in between this, and let's just kind of enjoy it.
bingo.
So I think
I
there's
like that.
another aspect of being like so naive to what's ahead of you that you're just like it doesn't give you the opportunity to psych yourself out.
Yeah.
You know?
I love it. I love that. It makes me flash back a little bit to when Melody and I ran our first 50 miler. It was down in Bryce Canyon, there in southern Utah, and we don't really spend a lot of time down there. And we had never hit those trails before. I'd never even been to that state park. I lived in Utah, but I'd never even been to that park. And so honestly, as I was training though, I remember saying the melody multiple times. I was like, just think of it on race day, because we were hitting the same trails over and over again. We were kind of getting tired of it, but like race day, it's fresh trails, it's new sights.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And it gets you psyched, because it's like you're going to run somewhere that you've never ran before and see things you've never seen before. And it does add another level of energy to you, because it's almost the anticipation of what's next, rather than sometimes it's the dread. If you do know the course, it can turn into dread because you know what that climb is like.
No, for sure. And, on the course, I've got my trail map here just in case I need to reference it. But, from like Lambs all the way up to, really like Desolation, like that's all climbing. And it sucked. But, I had no idea. So it was just like, well, I just, I got to Upper Big Water, I think at like, I don't know, 10 or something. And it was cool. I could just see like little lights like up above me. And I was like, I have no idea what's up there. I just assume I'm going that way because everyone else is that way. And I just found it very fun and fresh. And like, there was just, I think, maybe it's just me. I don't know. Some people might think it's totally different. They want to know like what's around every corner, but like it took almost like a whole mental part of the race away.
Yeah.
It's just like you said, it's like it's new, it's fresh, it's cool. I've never seen that tree or this trail or this lake before.
You're living more in the moment.
In the moment.
In 100-miler, that's honestly, I think that's one of the biggest keys to success. You got to be where you're at. Because if you let that mind start running on you, it can run out of control, start to snowball.
The mental stuff is insane. Yes. But and like going back to training, I think we talked about it earlier, and your last podcast actually talked a lot about this. Having kids and stuff, and like how do you train for a 100-miler when you have a full-time job, 2 kids, you try to have a life outside of running.
Yeah.
The way I get my miles in is, unfortunately, I get up at 4 a.m. and I usually do like about an hour run. Um, I don't put anything really on Strava because I don't like getting obsessed with numbers and paces and stuff. I just go out. I'm pretty familiar with my neighborhood, so I know exactly like that's 6 miles, that's 4, that's whatever. And I listen to your podcast a lot. I listen to other podcasts, and if it's an hour long, I'm just like, well, I'm going on an hour run. Just listen to the episode. So I just try to my mornings tend to be like an easier run. I do them fasted because I don't like eating anything. Um, and then I actually run twice a day, every
Okay.
single day. I usually take one day off a week. But then I'll go do my second run at lunch. I've got a Planet Fitness right next to my office, so it's really convenient. Um, and I'll usually do about a 4.5 mile run on the treadmill, but I'll do it I think usually I do it at like a 7:20 pace. So that's kind of like my fast, harder, whatever tempo run you want to call it. And then the morning stuff is usually easy, slower. I don't even turn my watch on for one of those in a while, but
And so
so I don't even know.
do you even keep track of miles like for your week, or you just kind of keep it in your head?
Generally, I would say, yeah. I mean, I think I would probably say I average about 10 miles a day. I just break it up into 2 runs
Yeah.
just because it fits the schedule better.
Yeah.
Um, but then, and I didn't do this on purpose at all, but it's just the way my training evolved. But the more I've thought about it over the last couple of years, that type of training really suits ultra running, because especially the longer races, because you have so many different phases of a race. I mean, my experience at Wasatch was wild. The first, I don't know, to Bountiful, I was on cloud 9. It was the best run of my life. And then from Sessions to Big Mountain, I wanted to die, you know? And then from Big to Alexander was even worse. And then coming into Lambs Canyon, I told my mom, my dad were my crew for me. I was sitting at Lambs and I was like, I'm definitely going to drop.
So that's basically halfway for our listeners.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
mile
it's
47, 48.
right. And I got there and I was like, I'm definitely dropping. And I actually texted my little mentor friend, Andrea, and I was like, I think I'm going to drop. I don't really know what to do. I'm just destroyed. And
So
she
what
gave me
was like the main thing that was bringing you
the
down?
sun.
Okay.
The
It was a
sun.
hot day.
It was, well, yeah, I mean, it was hot. It was warm for sure.
Yeah.
But I can't explain this other than you got to feel what I felt. But I wasn't overly warm. It was just from the top of Bear Canyon to Lambs Canyon, which is 40 miles. You are just directly in the sun.
Yeah, you're just on
There's a
ridges. Yep.
yeah, there's a couple places, if I remember right, Bountiful, I think there's you get through some woods and there's a stream somewhere. But you get up to Sessions and stuff all the way to Lambs, really. It's just,
Yeah.
you were exposed and the sun just beat the living you know what out of me.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just got down to the Lambs Canyon place and just looked at my parents and was like, this is not going well. But it was one of those things that and I mean, tying this back into training, the next phase of the race from Lambs to Upper Big Water up to the top peaks of the race, I don't know what happened, but it just clicked and I had the second best run of my life, on the day.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe I'm overthinking that. I don't know if running twice a day has anything to do with maybe my body's just better at, running, stopping, running again, stopping, running again, stopping. But it seemed to work for me, at least. I don't know.
No, I've heard that before, the whole train at different times
Yep.
of the day. And I could see, I mean, probably mentally it does help for sure to know that, hey, I've done plenty of runs, in the afternoons, I've done plenty of runs in the evening or go after dark or in the dark. But yeah, I love to hear that though, because the I like to say with hundreds, like it's like it's waves. You're gonna have a good wave come, and you're gonna ride that for a while, but then all of a sudden that wave's just gonna leave you, and you're gonna feel like you're at the bottom of the earth
Yeah.
for a bit. And so it's about keeping moving through that bad section, and eventually, if you're doing things right, if you're keeping the food and the hydration going in, you're gonna find another wave there that you're gonna start to pick it up and surprise yourself, honestly.
Yeah. And the other thing that I do with training that, there's probably a lot of coaches or people who are gonna like cringe at this, but I don't really do any long runs at all.
I
Like I
was going
just
to
use,
ask you that.
yeah, I use like, because I guess typically now for the last couple of years I've done a big race in April, and then I do my kind of annual 50K in December, and then I'll try to, like this year I did Wasatch in September. Um, but I just kind of use like the races as the long runs, and the only reason for that is I just found that like, you go bust out like 20, 30 miles on a Saturday, like number one, it uses your whole day, and number two, it sometimes can take like up to a week to really recover. Well then, I was thinking about it and I was like, well, I just lost a week of training because I'm trying to recover from a long run, which, in my opinion, didn't really do me anything at this point because I've done the distance, I've done 50Ks, I've done other races, so like I know exactly what it's gonna feel like. So why not just keep steadily logging miles and building my endurance up instead of doing that for a couple weeks, then going out and doing a longer run and taking 3 or 4 days off to recover and try to start the cycle over. I just kind of try to hammer consistently through the whole training cycle until race day.
That's
I don't know.
fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm never one to tell someone that this is right or wrong, and that leads me. You said something through our email correspondence that caught my attention. Speaking of that, you talked about how you don't really think there's a no one size fits all theory with ultra running. You talked about like some people will say you got to get this many grams of carbs and this much glucose, fructose. You got to train this way. And you said find your way of training. Is this? Tell me a little bit about how you discovered that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just well, like for example, like in the mornings, I don't ever eat anything before I go for a run. So like I'm always fasted at the first run, and I think I just kind of got my body accustomed to that, which I also think helps in an ultra because there are times when you are super fasted, you're super hungry, kind of missed your aid station logistics, and you don't have what you need, and
Yeah.
yeah, I just think like there's so much information out there, and every person, whether they're like a legit coach, like I mean, like this is one of my favorite books to read, Jason Koop's Big Thing,
Uh huh.
but it's so incredibly like in the details. Like I don't really care what the mitochondria do with certain types of
Yeah.
carbohydrates. Like maybe,
You're going into biology class there.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't, and then you read something online and someone will say like, you have to have 100 grams of carbs per hour, um, or you need to do this. You need to do like a training block of like 6 weeks, and it needs to be this focus, and then an 8 week block, and then a 12 week block, and it's like if that works for you, if you're one of those people who like really need like a checklist to say like, yes, I did my 12-mile run today, tomorrow's 4, the next is 6, like go do that. Like I'm not saying it's anything wrong with it. It just like it doesn't work for me. I'm just like I don't want to think about what I have to do today. I'm just gonna go run and just go log
Yeah.
miles. Um,
Yeah.
and the other thing too, I think if you figure out what works for you, I think it makes race day a heck of a lot easier too. Um, and just try to simplify everything. Like
Yeah.
that's probably, if I had to like sum up like maybe my whole philosophy on what works for me and what I like to do, is just like what's the simplest thing I can do? Whether it was training, which is just consistently twice a day, an easy run, a harder run kind of thing, or during the races, like, I didn't want to have to worry about like, oh, I don't have my brand of goo or my brand of like whatever, um,
Yeah.
food that you use. So it was like,
Or
I,
electrolyte drink.
yeah, I just got used to like eating Skittles and gummy bears during races because you can always find them. They're
Yeah.
always good. And it's just simple and it's. And
Yeah.
it's not. Um, so yeah, I just think, definitely read everything and listen to like podcasts and absorb it all, but then start putting little things into practice and seeing what works for you. Because certain
Yeah.
things might work for you that don't work for me, or I just don't like doing it. And then if you don't like to do it, then that just brings in a whole negative thing into your prep and your training, and these things are
Yeah.
hard enough. You don't need any negative like mental stuff going on.
I think I think your advice with simplify your training, figure out what works for you. That hits home. I mean, because it takes so much time and effort to get ready for one of these, and but if the more simple you can make it, the more you can read your body, read your situation that you're in,
Hmm.
and be real with yourself. And like you said, I love that goos and I mean gummy bears and Skittles. That's awesome. And honestly, that sounds a whole heck of a lot cheaper than having 30 goos that you pack to your race.
Oh, I know I got about 50 of them from Halloween a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago.
There
Like
you,
they're all, yeah,
yeah, you
and
stock up at Halloween, you get your
yeah,
running nutrition.
yeah, yeah. This is my favorite
But
time of year because I always
yeah,
got it. But
yeah, I think people overcomplicate a lot of these things, and
they they do, and
yeah,
at the end of the day, like you're you're just running. Like it's nothing crazy. Um, like when I did my first 50K, this is probably a good example of kind of what I mean. Um, I had a goal in mind, and like a time goal, and I started reading all these plans, and there's the whole like 80-20 mentality, like 80% easy, 20% hard, or you should do tempo runs, and my favorite word, fartlek, like all
yeah,
these weird little things, like you should be incorporating all those in your training. Um, and then I started thinking about it, and I was looking at this one. I remember specifically, I was looking at this one plan, like 50K plan thing, and it had like all the miles I was supposed to run, and then like it even had like some paces, and it was like if you want to run a sub whatever 5 hour 50K, your training needs to be like this. Well, what I noticed is like almost none of the training runs ever like got to the pace that it wanted me to run. And I was like, well, that's stupid. Like, how are you gonna train? Like, I know there's race and adrenaline and all that stuff, but like, I just remember sitting there like, if I want to run an 8 minute mile for 31 miles, I should probably get really, really good at running 8 minute miles. And so
yeah.
that's kind of how I just approached it from there on out. And um,
And that
you
worked
just
for you. You
it
just made that your goal to
that was the baseline. Just
try to make
yeah.
8 minute mile the normal
Well, it
thing.
just didn't, and it still kind of doesn't. I mean, I know the benefits of like slower miles now, but like it still kind of doesn't really make sense in my head, like just logically. Like if you want to run a 7 minute mile, get really good at running 7 minute miles. It just makes sense, right? Get your body conditioned to what you're trying to do, and your body will almost go into like autopilot and do it.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I just that's how I kind of approach training. You want to run a sub 4 minute marathon, then go run a few sub 4 minute marathons and get really good at those.
yeah,
Instead of trying to get all weird with the data and all that stuff.
yeah. Well, I'm not going to hate on it. Obviously, it worked for you. You got the job done.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
let's go back to the race. We've been kind of back and forth, which I've liked
sure, yeah.
this. I've actually really liked this style, this format of race to training, race to training. Okay, so you talked about how you got that second wind. You started going towards Brighton. You were feeling better. I'm guessing it's nighttime now for you, right?
Yep, yep.
Um, what take me through that last like third of the course there, those last 30, 40 miles as you're
Awful.
now starting to approach the
Yeah.
finish.
Yeah, so at Lambs, I told my parents I was going to quit. But I think I was there at, I don't remember the time, but I remember I think they told me that they were like, you have like 20, I wish I knew what time I came in. I could look it up, but they were like, you have 21 miles or 23 miles left, or I'm sorry, hours left. Like, you're gonna finish this. I got there right when the sun went under like
Yeah.
Park City is when I got there.
I'm guessing you were there around like 6 to 7 ish
Six,
then.
yeah, that sounds right. I think they said I had like 24 hours left.
Yeah, if it was
And
24 hours you were there, yeah, I'd say you probably anywhere from 5 to 7.
yeah, that sounds about right. Um, and like I mentioned, I texted my buddy Andrea and was just like, dude, I'm dying. Like, what do I do? And she was like, take 45 minutes. Just you have so much time left. Just sit. She was like, if you have caffeine, take some caffeine. If you have some like ibuprofen or something, just take that. Get like a legit meal in you if you can, or some substantial calories. And then she said, just relax. Like, and I did exactly that. I happened to, all my drop bags had, some form of Tylenol or something in it just in case. I had a caffeine pill in every one. I had electrolytes in all of them. And then my parents brought me a sandwich. So I just did exactly what she said, kind of got my body calmed down a little bit. And then the sun went down, which I think was the biggest help. Like you just finally out of that, like, I can't even explain what the sun was like. But then, so I obviously changed my mind and was like, I'm not dropping. So I went back out, and I think walking up the road up Lambs really helped just kind of like ease back into moving and walking and all that stuff. And it was nice and cool in the canyon. And then from there, like, I don't know, we crested like, I don't know where exactly that is, what the name of it, but like where you come up over at the top of the Lamb's climb and then you drop back down a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
We happened to get, like, I have a great picture of it. We happened to be right there when the sun was like down and it
Oh
was like
man.
that dark orange and red, and it was
Yeah.
beautiful. And so like the temperatures and then the seeing that and just getting my body like not hurting and stuff, it just something clicked at the top of that mountain and I went running all the way down, and then I did like this really nice comfortable jog up to um, the Big Water aid station. And for people who have done it before, that one is cool. Like they've got all the neon lights and it's like a really fun thing. So that just kind of like boosted my spirits a little bit more. I wasn't alone for that. Like I was kind of trailing this group of guys who all sort of knew each other, but I just kept them in my sights. And then I just, for some reason, I found like the climbing was, I was really good. I was better than I expected at climbing. I really was not good at going downhill. Um, and from Alexander to essentially Catherine's Pass is almost all uphill.
Yeah.
And that's like 30 miles.
Yeah.
And like it was just, everything was just clicking, and I had like my complete second wind. It was great. All the aid stations were super fun. It wasn't super cold. I think it was like maybe got to like 50 that night. So it was nice because like you didn't have to have a jacket and gloves
Yeah.
and kind of all bundled up. Um, and then coming down off of Scott's Tower thing.
Yeah.
The drop into Brighton. I mean, that was cool because, like I think we were talking before the show. Brighton's got a super, super sentimental, like, purpose or meaning to me. That's where me and my dad, I think the first time we ever went to Utah snowboarding, we went to Brighton and we just hit one of those like magic powder days. If you've ever been there on one of those days, you know what I'm talking about. And it was like the resort that we just kept going back to. We actually don't, it's the only resort in Utah that we don't bring like our friends to. Me and my dad were like, no, that's ours. Like,
Yeah.
we'll go to Powder or Snowbird or whatever. But we're like, Brighton is like ours.
Yeah.
So, I've hiked it a bunch of times with my parents. I've got pictures of both my kids in, the little carriers.
Yeah.
So Brighton was just awesome. And so I just kind of got like that little emotional boost coming into Brighton. But then I'll tell you what, like, I've done the Brighton climb and it's awful. It's long. It was kind of cold up there, but everything was going great until Catherine's Pass, and then those downhills just tore me up. Like, that's when I realized, like, I have no idea how to even walk downhill. Like, I felt like such a like noob. I was like, these are steep and they're those stupid rocks, and every ditch, or it's not ditch, but every trail is shaped like this.
Divots, a V
Yeah,
shape.
and it's like, do you walk on the outside? Do you try to go
there's
in,
no
like,
flat footing.
no, and it was so dark, and you've got that like tunnel vision with your headlamp, and that's where like the second suck like came in for me.
Okay.
And I just found like the downhills were so horrible. And then the other thing that was really demoralizing for me, and this is the disadvantage of not knowing the course, was if you look at the trail map, like, you assume from here to the end is downhill. There's like 20 climbs along this. So, me not knowing any better, I was like, oh, once you get to, the little rock spring thing, dude, it's downhill. You're good. You're coasting. And I was so wrong about that. And it was like every time I turned around, I'm like, oh, we're going back uphill again. Like, what are we doing? And then the sun came out again. And it just beat me to death again. Like, I mean, when you get to Decker at mile 95, you start up the road that goes along the reservoir.
Yeah.
And I felt really bad, but I like kind of politely cussed out my mom a little bit on that road because I was so hot and I was out of everything. Like, I thought, oh, it's only 4.5 miles. Like, if anyone on your show is going to run it and they've never done it, like, stock up at Decker because that road never ends. But like my little tracker thing, because they had a tracker this year, my mom kept texting me. She was like, you should almost be here. And I'm like, well, I'm not. Like, what do you want me to do?
It's the worst thing to say.
Yeah. I'm walking like a 30-minute mile. I can't even put pressure on my left or my right foot because I had a blister, the size of Texas on it. And she's like, where are you? Like, what are you doing? Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm going to throw this phone in the reservoir in a minute. And just the ending, dude, that like, and even before that, like from Rock Springs down to that little, or whatever, that second to last aid station, like that trail just sucked.
Yeah.
You're in like that shrubby oak stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just downhill.
The last 15 miles of Wasatch, it's a grind. Yeah. I've never run the full thing, but I've paced it twice. I've paced the last 30 from Brighton to the finish twice. And
I hated it.
It's not a pretty section. You're beat up, ready to be done, and then you're right. It's a lot of just that last road. You're just going in and out along
In
the
and out, in
reservoir,
and out.
in and out, in and out. And
Yeah,
it feels like
that's
you're not getting any closer to the end of the
it.
reservoir.
It doesn't. And that was one thing my mom kept saying. She was like, "Can you see us now?" I'm like, "No, I
No,
can't see anything. My
I
eyes are
see. I
crusted
see
over
a
with
lake
salt."
and a mountain.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what was funny is it was like I think I was like within 2 miles, and finally I called her because I was like, "You have to stop texting me. Like, nothing's gonna make this go any faster. I can barely move. I'm out of all water. I want to quit. If I could jump in that lake right now, I would. Like, I don't even care." I told her, I said, I've less than 2 miles to go, and if I had the option to be picked up right now, I would do it. Like 100%. I was done. Um, and my favorite story of the whole race was she was like, "Well, do you want me to just walk towards you with like a bottle of water?" And I was like, I don't even know if that's allowed, but I don't care. I was like, I feel like I'm gonna die. So I was like, sure, just start walking to me. We'll meet up eventually. And what was funny, and I could have punched her, and I know she's my mom, but she gets to me. We meet up on the trail, and she looks at me. She's like, "Oh, that really sucked." And I'm like, "You did 1 mile. I've done 99 of these. Give me the water bottle." like you don't get to complain right now. But like in hindsight, I thought that was so funny. She's like
Yeah.
complaining about her little 1 mile
Yeah.
walk, and I'm like on the verge of death.
Oh, well, yeah, yeah.
And
It
then,
makes total sense. I've been in
yeah,
your shoes. I know exactly what was
well,
going through your head there.
you've paced it, so like you drop in and you get to the asphalt, and that's uphill too.
Yeah, it's uphill. The last
And
half
it's
mile's all uphill.
Yeah, and it's hot, and the asphalt's radiating all this heat, and you can see the stupid little finish line over there, and you're like, "Oh my gosh!" Because I was doing the math, I was like, "It's 3/4 of a mile. That's still 20 minutes away. Like
Yeah,
I have to stare at that thing for the next 20 minutes."
yeah,
It was awful, but I had like 3 hours to spare, so I wasn't worried about time. But um, another thing that I think I mentioned in the email or something, it's those moments that like you really gotta like dig and figure out like, why am I doing this? Because I don't need to be doing this. No one's telling me I have to do this. And like, I know a lot of people will tell stories and joke around and kind of getting in that like dark place in these races, but I mean, it's legit. Like you do go through it, and that's where you kind of, figure out who you are and what you're about, because I mean, they push you to like the limit and then beyond.
yeah,
And no one's making you do it. That's the crazy thing. We're just out
yeah,
there on our own, and we paid money most of the time to
yeah.
do these. It's kind of crazy.
So, what did you learn about yourself through that experience?
Well, it was it was definitely like a massive confidence boost, like for like, I mean, specifically like my running ability or whatever. But I mean, even just kind of in life, it's like, I heard a quote. I don't know who said it. I think it was, well, anyway, I don't remember, but it was like, if everyone should go run 100 miles, because there's really nothing else in life. And granted, that's might be a little extreme exaggeration, but like most things in life are pretty dang easy after you've put yourself through one of those. And it just gives you like such a different perspective, in my opinion, when you're like, "Oh, I don't want to, go do this right now," or "I don't want to go, whatever, cut the grass." It's like, no, that's super easy,
Yeah,
you know.
that'll take me an hour.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
yeah,
and I don't know. I think some there's some really like intense like there's a spiritual connection, I think, out there in the middle of the night.
yeah,
When you're alone and you're struggling, and there's I don't know, I can't really explain it. I think it's one of those things that you kind of have to do. to really get like the emotional side of it and that like weird mental thing. A lot of people tell stories about hallucinating. Like thankfully I've never done that. But yeah, I mean, you definitely you figure
It
yourself out in those
it
moments.
yeah, it breaks you down to your raw self. And like I said, I've said this on the podcast 100 times. I just think it's honestly, when you're out there, most of the time when you are doing it, you don't realize this. But if you're out there crewing, pacing, helping others out, it's it's like a spiritual ground that you're walking on as you see these people just, they're broken down. They got blisters up the wazoo. They're chafing. They're probably dealing with heat exhaustion.
Hmm.
They've done 20,000 feet of vert, and they still got 6 more miles to go. And, they're just pulling everything they have out of them, to bring themselves those final 6 miles. And it's
Yeah, and
beautiful.
yeah, and it definitely like I think it certainly separates, you know, the people and like nothing against people who, don't finish because these things are stupid hard, but like there's definitely like you kind of it, it weeds people out. Like I don't know how
Yeah.
else to say that, but like you figure out you can either do this and you've got it inside of you to do it, or you might not. But like if you want to figure out if you are that person, like these are the best things to do because
Yeah.
like you said and like I said, I mean, there are some horrible moments in these races,
Oh, yeah.
and it's just do you have because it's not physical, it's these things
It,
are it, I don't even maybe this is too low, but like I'd go as far as to say like these things are like 20% your physical ability and 80% do you have the mental strength to continue to do this when no one's making you do it and it's you're completely destroyed. It's like, do you have that thing inside of you that's just like, put your head down and go to work? Like,
yeah.
you know, you're here,
Oh,
you're gonna finish, and yeah, you figure that out real quick though,
you're
for
spot on.
sure.
Spot on. It's really amazing what our body can give us if the mind's just telling it to
Yeah,
keep moving, to keep
yeah.
going, that you can't stop. It's the body will keep moving. It will keep going as long as you have the
We're
mental
so,
fortitude.
yeah, we're so capable of crazy things. You just gotta like break this part down.
Yeah.
Like you said, your body will do it.
Well, Matt, this has been it's been a great conversation. You've given a lot of good insights, especially for people looking to do this for the first time. But if there's one piece of advice you had to choose to give someone who wants to run 100 miles for the first time, what would you say?
Run. I mean, like you really can't boil it down any simpler than that. You're going to be running a lot, so just run a lot. Don't, like I said earlier, take in the information, but then also there's a lot of it you can just drown out. But at the end of the day, it comes down to putting one foot in front of the other and just building that endurance. Just, it's like, most sports, if you want to get better at the sport, you play the sport. So like don't overthink it. If you want to get better at running, whether that's faster or longer or whatever, then just run faster or run longer. And over time, you'll get better and better and better. And but yeah, that's take out all of the things that will overcomplicate it and just run.
I
Like I
like
said,
it.
I don't even start my watch unless
I
it's a
like
race
it.
because it's just like because runners will do that. They'll say, "Oh man, like yesterday I ran this mile at 8:07 pace and today it was 8:11. I slowed down." Like
Yeah.
that's 3 seconds. Like,
Yeah.
but we all do it
Yeah.
because runners are data nerds, and so sometimes it's just shut all that stuff off, put on your favorite shoes, and just go.
Yeah.
That would be
I,
my best
I
advice.
I love it. I love it. You're my kind of guy, Matt.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for hopping on the podcast today. I really appreciated it. Love talking to you today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. This was great.
So a big thank you goes out to Matt for joining me on the podcast. Like I said, he's my kind of guy. And, as I talked to Matt, I started to reflect upon my own training. I've been in the ultra world for 6-ish years now, going on 6 years, I think. And talking to Matt made me flash back to my first couple years in the ultra world, Jacob. And honestly, it made me miss him a little bit. Matt talked about just making it simple. And I think I've overcomplicated things, to be honest with you guys. You start learning like, oh, you got to do this. You got to hit this benchmark. You got to get this many days of strength. You got to get this many miles in. You got to get this much vert in. You got to get this many calories in, both on and off the run and all this. And it just becomes a little bit overwhelming. And I liked Matt's point about just sifting through all that, and take little pieces here and there, stack that away, know that, okay, this could affect me, but make it simple. Figure out what your body needs, how you work, what's the best situation for you, your work schedule, your family schedule, your life outside of running, how much training you can fit in. So do that. Fit in what you can. Make it simple. You're not going to train perfectly. You're not going to eat perfectly. But just make it simple, accept it, and go out there and give it your all. Because in the end, like Matt said, it's 80% mental. So big takeaway for me. I'm definitely going to reevaluate some things in my training and also in life with that kind of attitude. So thank you, Matt, for joining me today. I appreciate that. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. If it helped you at all, I'd invite you to share it with someone else that might be trying to go for their first 100-mile finish. The more we can get this message out to others, the more that we're going to be able to keep sharing it and keep the resources coming to you guys to be able to get out and run that 100 miles. So anyways, thank you everyone for joining me today. I appreciate each one of you for spending some time with us today. And remember, if you want to run 100 miles, make it happen.
Running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100?